Good morning, I'm James. It's June 20, 2026. What's on the news? Iran war live. Trump threatens Tehran as US bombs Syriac Qasem for second day. If this is the kind of news that you see when you wake up in the morning and before you have your breakfast, how would you answer the question? What would happen to the US Iran MOU? The MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding, between the US and Iran, signed on the 17th of June, is some kind of an interim deal or a pre-deal before a possible lasting or permanent peace deal. Under the MOU, the parties have a 60-day window to resolve the issues on the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, the removal of the US naval blockade, the blockade of the blockade, actually the US blockade of Iranian ports, Iran's nuclear program, and so on and so forth. They have a 60-day window to come up with a lasting permanent peace deal or agreement. But the way things are going today, yesterday, and the other day, do you think the MOU will produce a meaningful peace deal? The answer is no. The US is not sincere in its diplomacy. It is only after the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, number one, to stabilize its petroleum reserves, which would plunge to a critical level if the conflict drags on for several weeks more. And number two, to portray the Trump administration as a seeker of peace and to make the economic situation get better somehow, to convince American voters to vote for the Republicans in November. A U.S. Congress dominated by the Democrats is synonymous with a U.S. Congress that will impeach, convict, and kick Trump out of the White House. That's why. So you have an insincere, hypocritical U.S. in its diplomacy, and then you also have a Zionist entity, that entity called Israel, and you have the Zionists in the U.S. hell bent on undermining the road to peace or any U.S. Iran peace deal. Remember, up to this point, there is not a single convincing indication that the U.S. is brave enough to defy the Zionist or Israeli lobby that has deeply infiltrated US politics and has placed most US politicians under the thumb of Zionist donors. Still on the news, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. By the way, I don't want to call him Benjamin Netanyahu. That's not his original surname. I love to call him Benjamin Mylekowski. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Mylekowski says there is no room for two states between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. His remarks come as Israeli expands measures in the occupied West Bank that critics say further undermine the prospect of a Palestinian state. Between the sea and the river, there is no room for two states, says Benjamin Mylekowski. As if as if Benjamin Mylekowski, as if the Zionist entity called Israel ever considered the idea of having a state for the Palestinians. Let us look at the Likud party's original party platform. This is from the Jewish Virtual Library, Likud Party Original Party Platform 1977. Under under Likud, under the right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, or Eretz Israel. Under letter A, it says the right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, it is eternal and indisputable and is linked with the right to security and peace. Therefore, Judea and Samaria, by the way, they call the West Bank Judea and Samaria. And under several UN resolutions and the 2024 landmark advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, or ICJ, the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, Israel since 1967 has been illegally occupying the Palestinian territories of Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the West Bank, and the Golan Heights of Syria. So, yes, the West Bank, which the Zionists call Judea and Samaria, this is a Palestinian territory that the Zionist state of Israel has been illegally occupying since 1967, according to the UN and according to the ICJ. So the right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is eternal and indisputable and is linked with the right to security and peace. Therefore, Judea and Samaria, meaning the West Bank, will not be handed to any foreign administration. Between the sea and the Jordan, that is between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. And by the way, according to the UN resolutions and the ICJ advisory opinion, the Israeli settlements in the Palestinian territories and in the Golan Heights, which are illegally occupied by the Zionist state of Israel, the Israeli settlements there are also illegal, and because they are also illegal, they must also be dismantled. From the river to the sea, meaning from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, the claim of the Zionists is that there is only Israel, or there is only Israeli sovereignty. In other words, there should be no room or space or opportunity of any Palestinian state or for any Palestinian state. The Likud party is the political party of genocidal Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Malekowski. By the way, genocidal Prime Minister Benjamin Malekowski has a case before the ICC, International Criminal Court, which has issued a warrant for his arrest for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. And along with him, there is also an arrest for the former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. If you remember, it was Netanyahu who described the Palestinians as Amalek, implying therefore that the Palestinians could be slaughtered en masse, including children, women, and the elderly among them. And Yoav Gallant spoke of the Palestinians as human animals who could be deprived or who should be deprived of water, food, and electricity, who should be starved en masse. So I love calling Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as Benjamin Malekowski. I don't want to call him. I hate calling him Benjamin Netanyahu. Uh, Netanyahu's family is not indigenous to the Middle East. They are Europeans. The same with all the other Israeli prime ministers. They are all Europeans, um, and they are European migrant settler colonists. They are European migrant settler colonists. That is why all Israeli prime ministers had to change their surnames, their European surnames, to surnames that sound Hebrew, to make their surnames sound indigenous to Palestine. So Benjamin's father changed their surname from Malekowski, which sounds very Central or Eastern European, to Netanyahu to make it sound indigenous to the region. Because they are not from there. They are from outside the Middle East. And they just came as migrant settler colonists. Another news item, U.S. Central Command says it carried out additional strikes on multiple targets in Iran after accusing Iranian forces of attacking a Panama flagged oil tanker transiting the Strait of Hormuz with a one-way drone. It bears stressing that before February 28, the Strait of Hormuz was open, that Iran was not controlling the traffic of vessels in that energy choke point. Iran has been saying, however, for decades, that if the US would attack Iran, Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz. But the arrogant and imperialist US doesn't care. The US and Israel still went on to wage an illegal war of aggression against Iran. So if the strategic energy waterway is closed, or if the transit of commercial shipping through it is tremendously disrupted, is squeezing the global economy, it is the aggressors, the US and Israel, that must be blamed. It doesn't matter if the US went into the war of aggression because it was bamboozled by Israel, or that the US launched the war pursuing its own imperialist interests with or without Israeli instigation. These two entities, the US and Israel, the aggressors, are the ones that must be held accountable. So I can now have my breakfast.